tal, ¿qué tal?
Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Group 1.
So, very good morning class, I'm Ivan, and together with me are my group mates, Jun Han, Ming, Daichao, and Kelvin. So today our group has chosen a topic on conflict management, and we'll be looking at a case study where we'll look at how conflict arises and how a conflict can be managed. So the case study we'll be looking at will be the Little India Riot. Sorry. So it'll be the Little India Riot. So it's a well-known riot, and while studying this case study, we actually came up with several questions that we'll be looking through during this presentation. And the questions are factors that led to the riot, which will be covered by myself. Approaches taken will be covered by Jun Han. How the damage will be minimized will be covered by Heng Fu. And Daichao will touch on the measures taken. Finally, Kelvin will conclude today's presentation on what can our classmates learn from this case study. And at the end of this presentation, we'll be having a Q&A session. So if you've got any questions, please hold it on to the end, right? So, the Little India Riot. Why did I say that it's a well-known riot? Because it's one of Singapore's worst public disorder in over 40 years. And it happened 3 years back in 2013, December 8. And why did it all happened because of one fatal accident. Because a 33-year-old foreign worker that came from India was actually knocked down and pinned under the bar, a private bus. So, after this accident happened, actually there are large crowds or a large amount of crowd actually swarmed towards the scene to check out what actually happened. And the large amount of people actually led on to a riot. And we'll find out more throughout this presentation. And next we'll just look at, after hearing some background information, we'll look at what are the factors that actually led to this riot. So according to an article from Channel News Asia, there are 3 main factors that led to this incident. The first factor is actually misperception, and the second is culture and psychology of the crowd. Finally, the alcohol intoxication. So before I go on with my presentation, can I just ask you guys what number do you think this is? Come on. Like, yeah, see, there's definitely some people saying it's 6 or 9. It's down to perspective. So perspective is a very individual kind of thoughts, you see. So in this incident, the foreign worker actually had a misperception towards the accident. And while they actually held the bus driver and the timekeeper of the bus responsible for the accident. And after the police arrived to the scene, instead of apprehending the bus driver and the timekeeper, they actually tried to escort both of them out of the scene. This actually aggravated the crowd, causing more emotional reaction. And this actually led on to untrue rumors circulating around the area, causing more distress and provoked more rioters. Next is the culture and psychology of the crowd. The culture and psychology, that night's event actually led on, exceeded their expectations. So it didn't met on the expectations for the responding officer. What they expected was the responding officers to be responding to the deceased first instead of the bus driver and timekeeper. So this actually fueled the desire for strict justice and taking laws into their own hand. So strict justice is actually pretty common back in India, see. Finally, it's alcohol intoxication. The deceased himself was actually measured with 3.5. He measured with his blood alcohol level nearly three times more for the threshold of a normal motorist at this point of his death. And many of them actually admitted to having, many of the rioters actually admitted to having consumption of alcohol after the riot. And after they are being caught, so some of them couldn't even recall the incident until video footage was shown. So having here these 3 factors, although the alcohol intoxication is not a direct cause, but it's one of the main contributions. So having here these 3 main factors, let us look at how conflict can be managed. I'll pass it on to the next speaker, Jun Han.
Okay, thank you, Zheng. Now I'll talk about the approach being taken by the foreign workers and the police. Okay, there is a total of 5 different conflict response modes, which are the competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. Okay, for my part in this case study, I will only be concentrating on the competing and compromising mode. The competing mode is a win-lose situation whereby one party will need to overcome the other to achieve goals. The benefit is that it is effective for self-defense and quick action. However, it will also generate ill will both unpleasant and costly. As for the compromising mode, it is a win-win situation whereby each party will need to sacrifice something important to achieve an agreement. The benefit is that it will provide an acceptable outcome for everyone. However, the dominant party will have too much advantage, and hence it will not give the best results. Now shifting the attention back to the Little India riot. In Little India, most of the foreign workers are from India. According to a news article from today's online, when the Indian national witnessed the death of their fellow countrymen at the traffic incident sites and actions were not taken to arrest the bus driver, they react with violence. And we can also closely link this approach to the competing mood we have discussed earlier. They felt that the police is only protecting the local and not foreign workers like them. Hence, they felt the need for self-defense immediately, and so they took the laws into their own hand. As for the police, when the first police and ambulance arrived at the traffic incident scene, there are already around 100 foreign workers crowding at the area. Initially, the police tried to communicate with the foreign workers, requesting for them to disperse and go home so that the police can more efficiently extract out the body of their fellow countrymen trapped under the bus and also investigate this traffic incident, so as to provide a acceptable outcome for everyone. We can also link this approach to the negotiation under the compromising approach. Okay, however, for this approach, the dominant party, which is now the foreign worker, will have too much advantage because they are large in number. Further on, the crowd not only did not disperse, they even start throwing projectiles at the police and medics. And this situation quickly escalated into the famous Little India riot. Okay, upon realizing that the compromising approach is not working, 300 officers from the SOC Special Operation Command and the Gurkhas contingent were activated to stop the riot forcefully, which can also link this approach to the competing mood we have discussed earlier. And although the competing mood is not a popular choice, however, considering that the life of the police and the innocent civilians in Little India are in danger and the damage that are being done to the public property, such a forceful approach is definitely necessary to stop the riot immediately. Okay, now I will pass to Heng Fu to talk about how can the damage be minimized.
Okay, thank you, Chia. So now I will cover the part on how could the damages have been minimized. So for the damages that's being done, right, it's classified into 3 categories: physical damage, social damage, and psychological damage. So for the physical damage, right, up to a total of $650,000 of public properties were being incurred. Damage such as like police cars overturned, burned, and damaged. Social damage, for example, let me give you, for Little India, right, there's shops that's like selling alcohols that's being closed down due to this incident. So whereas last but not least, for psychological damage. So for psychological damage, right, for the foreigners that is visiting Singapore, right, the numbers actually decline. So now I would like to ask you all a question like, okay, so how would so what is the message that the foreign workers they are trying to relay to us? Okay, so the message they are trying to relay is, due to misperception, the foreign workers actually perceive that the deceased, Mr. Kumar, was actually intentionally murdered by the bus driver. Hence, from this article, the Muslims actually violently riot in India after the Prophet Muhammad was being insulted. Therefore, this shows that just a small misperception can actually lead to a very huge misunderstanding, whereby in this case, it leads to which leads to this riot. Okay, so for the message that was being interpreted by the policeman itself, it was actually interpreted as, since riot does not occur in Singapore for like past 40 years, where the last riot was actually the race riot, the police deemed this as they are trying to disturb our public order. Hence, as mentioned by Jun Han earlier on, the police forces were actually deployed, and they actually used the compromising mode to try to control the mob itself. But as the conflict worsened, the SOC forces were actually deployed to use competing mode to actually overcome their goals, to regain back the public order. However, we feel that the police forces, they didn't really use the compromising mode to its fullest extent, and therefore it can be actually utilized even better for a win-win situation. Because in the case where they actually use the competing mode, right, it's actually for the policeman's side they actually won the battle, but for the foreign worker side they actually lost the war. Okay, so let us look how they can effectively use the compromising mode instead. So for the foreign worker side, they should have clarified the issues with the policemen. By knowing the facts, right, they might have not really incited this riot itself. Also, they should be more patient and hold in their anger instead of venting it out to seek for strict justice. Ultimately, the foreign workers, they are here in Singapore to earn a living. Therefore, a small fatal or mistake could actually send them back. This we think that they wouldn't want. So for the policeman's side, they actually could, same point as for the foreign workers, they could actually assert their views by explaining the situation to the foreign workers in hope that they might understand this situation and they might come down after this instead of forcefully dispersing the crowd, which actually in the end enraging them, causing this riot. For this to progress, they could seek interpreter or translator in Little India to actually talk to them in their native language, so as to show that they have actually the interest to resolve this conflict. So by this case, this can be actually attained the win-win situation where both sides doesn't really lose anything out. And so now I'll pass on my time to Daichao for his part on measures being taken.
Thank you, Heng Fu. Now let's look at what the government has done to prevent such a riot. First of all, is a new liquor law. Actually, temporary measure of curbing excessive drinking is actually temporary measures are introduced to curb excessive drinking in Little India. Basically, they ban any consumption and drinking of alcohol during weekends. However, this actually is a temporary measure. Before it expired, a new law was installed. Basically, the law states that no public drinking during night time from 10:30 p.m. to 7 a.m. next day. And for areas like Geelong and Little India, actually they are designated as liquor control zone, which they have a longer time during weekends and public holidays. So next were the four measures taken. Next is there are four measures taken by the police force. Basically, they will improve their communication, command and control capabilities. A new command operation room was set up at the end of 2014. It was equipped with more advanced technology for them to have a better control of any outbreak of accidents. And after that, there will be more trainings and equipment for the frontline officer. Basically, this is to ensure that the frontline officer actually are capable to handle large public incident like the riots. Thirdly, there will be an increase of manpower resources. By 2017, the SOC will hire 300 more officers. This is a number doubled from the year 2014. And after that, they cut down the approval process for all to activate the SOC. Now the division commander actually can activate the first SOC troop instead. Last time only the police director in operation can do that. So after they cut down the time, so actually this make the police force more efficient in handle such a case. Next will be the infrastructure. Actually, the government will improve the infrastructure in HDBs and areas near Little India. There will be more lightings even in the alleys and back lanes, and there will be more CCTV installed. By record, there is only 113 CCTVs installed before the riot. After that, the number shoot up to 250. And by the end of last year, actually there's another 88 more has been installed also. So there will be an increase in police presence in Little India. There will be 30 more officers nowadays during weekends, and there will be a dedicated SOC troop patrolling, standby at the Little India alone. So, and there will be, just to avoid this kind of riot again, actually the new road was planned for the bus drivers to ferry the workers so that they can avoid all the crowdiness in the Little India area. And for these workers, actually there are now sheltered waiting areas for them. So actually it's a dedicated place for them to wait for the bus. So the last two measures are done by the government for the workers. First, there will be more services and amenities outside Little India area. So actually, there's 4 more recreational centers in Thailand, and this is to accommodate the rising number of the foreign workers. And the last measure taken by the government was there will be better accommodation. Even though Singapore has been famous for that, they have a better accommodation for the workers than other countries. However, the government decided to improve it. Now there's almost 50 purpose-built dormitories, and more is coming in. All these new built dormitories actually come with inbuilt amenities and recreational centers. Actually, these 2 measures actually is to increase the living standard of the workers, to make them feel happy in Singapore, so that they won't be involved in the riot. And now I will pass on my time to Kelvin for conclusion.
Thank you, Daichao. Good morning, class. I'm Kelvin, and today I'm going to talk to you about what can we learn from this. As mentioned earlier by Ivan, clearly, misperception is one of the major factors that causes the conflict and riot. In fact, most conflict begins with misunderstanding or misperception. So what can we learn from this? Firstly, we learn that we should not be too quick to judge, just like what Bruce Lee has said. A quick temper will make a fool of you soon enough. Second, we learn that communication is key. Why do I say that? Have you guys ever wondered, what if one of the workers in the bus witnessed the accident that caused the death of Mr. Kumar, and he or she are able to explain, because he or she is able to speak their foreign language, are able to help to explain to the crowd what exactly happened? Would the outcome be different? Definitely. The riot will not even occur. Therefore, communication is really important during conflict management. Now I'm going to talk about the modes used by the Singapore government after the riot. There are 2 modes being used by the Singapore government after the riot. One of it is compromising mode. The law to restrict alcohol sales and consumption after 10:30 at public places is to prevent public disturbance. However, those who want to drink can still go to clubs, bars or pubs to drink. The second mode used by the government after the riot is collaborating mode. The government increased the number of recreation centers and venues to allow the foreign workers to spend their free time on. And this really improved relationships, and as the worker feels significant that the government cares for them enough to build such costly venues. And up to today, it is still proven that the 2 modes that are being used by the Singapore government after the riot is effective, as there are no further riots going on. As mentioned earlier by Chia Han, there are also 2 modes that the Singapore police force used during the riot. First, they use compromising mode, whereby the police try to explain and ask the crowd to disperse. However, due to the language barrier, the crowd do not understand, and worse still, the crowd become bigger. Therefore, there's a need to use competing mode, and it was proven that it is more effective. I'm not saying that the police cannot use compromising mode. However, in this case, the competing mode is a more effective way to disperse the crowd. My main point is there's no right or wrong modes to use during conflict management. However, we need to choose wisely on what modes to use when handling conflicts. Lastly, we learned that Singapore can never take peace for granted. Do you know that the police took 50 minutes to reach the scene after the time of notification? And this really teaches us a lesson whereby even though Singapore is a very peaceful country, we can never let our guard down. We should always be prepared to face any problem regardless of situation. And therefore, this is the last thing that we can learn, that Singapore should never take peace for granted. With that, I've concluded my part on what can we learn from this Little India case riot. Now the floor is open for Q&A. Thank you.
Class, we do need just one question per speaker, so please help. And before you ask your question, could you please indicate your name so that I know who you are? Please.
Fine, I'm not supposed to stop it. No need to stop. Okay. I think yours will be better. I'm not supposed to.
I got a question. Because the curfews are only set in certain areas in Singapore, so do you think it is a sort of discrimination against those race or people living there?
There's no curfew. Basically, there's only liquid restricted zones. Basically, is Geylang and Little India where they're. Oh. Basically, there's only two areas. Basically, the area is only Little India and Geylang. This like contains like all the races, basically. All races live there. Little India, there is HB housing. Geylang is also just HB housing. Basically, these are some tourist places, and there's people where people really gather and drink. So actually, these two areas actually is more have the prone to have excessive drinking. So actually, it's just to make a control out there. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to stand in the order of your presentation, and please don't be afraid to stand in front of the main screen.
Any more questions, guys? Is there any more questions? So are you guys actually curious about what happened more in the incident where, like, actually we didn't really give a lot of background information due to the time constraint. So probably if you would like to find out more about the riot, yeah. So actually when like what I mentioned before, misperception, when the accident happened, the workers held, like what I mentioned, like the workers held the bus driver and timekeeper responsible. It was actually because the deceased himself was drunk, like I mentioned. He was drunk and he actually tried to catch up with the bus. Instead, when he was really drunk, he was actually sort of escort down the bus instead, and was not allowed to board the bus. But he still tried to catch up with the bus, and that's how the accident actually happened. Yeah. So if you guys got any more questions, guys?
Okay. So as you guys said that after the riots, the government has done a lot of things, improvement. So I want to know that any punishment after the riots, or yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
there is a total of 9 foreign Indian nationals being charged on this case. Total of 29 being charged on this case, and they are all Indian nationals from India. Yeah, and yeah, that is currently I think now there's a total number of people being charged regarding the Little India, right?
Yes. And to add on to the point, right, some of them actually they are being sent back to India.
Okay, for my part, after I define that compromising approach is each party will sacrifice something important. Have you ever wondered what did the police sacrifice when they used the compromising approach initially? It's like because compromising approach is a win-win situation. So whereby the riot, the crowd of foreign workers will need to disperse so that police can investigate this traffic incident and also provide justice back to the foreign worker. So in other words, that the foreign workers will win something and the police will also achieve something, provided that the riot did not happen if the crowd were to disperse earlier.
Sorry, wouldn't it be more efficient for the police to have come out from a sorry, what's compromising? Then what's the
Competing.
Yeah, competing model. Actually, wouldn't it be more efficient for the police to have come out straight with a competing model instead? Because by right, the police have they've been charged to protect the public order. So in that scenario, wouldn't it have been more efficient to go from a competing model? Because if you think about it, if they have gone from a compromising model, as they have gone from a compromising model and did not prove successful, if I'm not wrong, based on police training, they should have activated the SOC much earlier, based on the events there. And also you mentioned about, I think one of the speakers mentioned about the police taking 15 minutes to get there. So is the fact that they use the compromising model linked to the speed of their response, or is it also the fact that they did not activate the SOC earlier?
Okay, to answer your question, why the police took 50 minutes? Because due to poor traffic, and also all their messages are sent across during one frequency. So that, meaning to say, during the conflict, their signal, as in their radio set, were being jammed. So they are unable to speak into or hear due to the noise of the crowd and also the large number of messages sent across the radio set. So they are unable to hear instruction from the upper up. Then therefore, there's a delay. There's a delay to deal with this conflict.
And on top of that, actually, why the police officer did not go for the competing mode straight away is because for every police force, as in every law enforcer, they actually have a standard operation procedure. So it's important. I mean, it's not necessary for them to straight away go into a more forceful manner. Usually, police officer will try to maintain the order of the scene first until when the situation is get out of hand. Then when there's a need to adopt a more forceful measure, then they will go for a competing measure. It's just that although they have the authority, the authority actually just given them the green light to go for the competing mode. But it's also better, I mean, in terms of a social impact, you see, it's better to adopt a more soft measure first, like try to talk to them, negotiate with them, try to ask them to disperse first, until if they don't want to sort of hit the advice, then the officer will go for the forceful measure. Yeah.
So you're saying that it's mainly because they wanted to compromise, as in they wanted to preserve the image of the police force as a mediating force. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, sort of, but definitely it's.
Speaker 3, add on to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is sort of a way that they wanted to keep us as a mediating force. Yeah. So basically, right, let's say given a situation, right, they will try to negotiate their way first instead of just forcefully control the crowd instead. Yeah. Then I think that, for example, right, let's say if they wanted to really force them to disperse, then instead of using compromising first, then competing, right? Let's say there may be news spreading to other countries, the police forces in Singapore just forcefully dispersed them out without knowing what happened and stuff. So basically, they just want to keep their image of as a mediator. Yeah.
So do you think that the image of the police force has taken a dip based on what happened to them, like some of the images that you show the police vehicles being overturned?
Yeah.
And do you think that the police force actually took a hit into their image based on the fact that they used the compromising model at first compared to a competing model?
Yeah, there's definitely an impact to this. However, I think that let's say if they actually use the competing mode first instead of compromising then competing, right? Let's say, because Singapore is not the only country out there, there are other countries too. So let's say in India, they might publish some article saying, the barbarian police forces in Singapore actually took down how many people. So they might actually interpret this story differently in terms of in Singapore. Because in Singapore, right, we actually know the full story of this whole content. compared to other countries, they might actually write out something different. That's why I think that it's actually good that they actually use compromising first, then competing next.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, let's wrap up for group 1. Thank you very much.